Last time, we crawled through the blood-soaked trenches of 30K, legion by legion, to pick out each one's strongest space marine. From the loyalist paragons like Sigismund and Corswain, to the traitor powerhouses like Khârn and Abaddon, we crowned the deadliest champions the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy had to offer. It was brutal, it was damn near exhausting, but it was awesome. Now we go a step further.
I'm tired of this, Grandpa.
That's too damn bad!
Because today, we're ranking all the champions we selected in the last video from weakest to strongest to finally decide who is the single strongest space marine from the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy. That means we're looking at everyone we crowned as their legion's top dog, plus a few honorable mentions and runner-ups I just simply couldn't leave out. These are characters who are still absolute powerhouses, many of them just barely losing to their legion's champion, or they're so essential to the Horus Heresy that leaving them out wasn't an option. Before we get to this bloodbath, let's lay down the ground rules. Just like last time, no Primarchs, no Demon Princes, no Dreadnoughts, and no post-Heresy feats. Once again, we're keeping things firmly grounded in Heresy-era carnage, which means we're only drawing from feats during the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy itself. Another ground rule to cover before we start ranking is that we'll be looking at each character at their absolute peak. This means we'll be scaling characters like Sigismund after receiving the Black Sword, Abaddon right after accepting the Blessings of Chaos, and Khârn when he's full "I hear voices and they all want me to take your skull" mode. So keep that in mind as we begin. These are the strongest versions of these warriors before the curtain fell on the heresy. And yes, I'll be repeating it over and over again, because I know half of you will still comment, "Actually, pre-corrupted Abaddon wasn't that strong, cow." Buddy, that's not the version we're talking about here. Another ground rule I want to lay out is the nature of honor duels. I kinda glossed over this in the last video, but they're a huge part of 30K, and a good portion of notable Space Marine feats come from them. The thing about honor duels is that they're typically not fought to the death, which makes them kind of tricky to judge. However, from my perspective, even if they're not trying to kill each other, both combatants are still trying to win. They're pushing themselves and using the full extent of their skill and strength to come out on top. So when I reference honor duels, I'll be treating them as legitimate demonstrations of a warrior's full combat capability, even if the stakes weren't lethal. Finally, we have a new addition to this video. I'm going to be trying it out to see if you guys like it and the visual it provides. So for videos like this, where there are so many goddamn characters, I am fully bringing out a Cow's Power Pyramid, so you guys can fully see the scale and the rankings of these characters. They'll be broken into 5 tiers. First, we have Apex Marine, elite warriors who vastly outperform standard Astartes. These are veterans, commanders, or specialists with extraordinary feats. They're strong enough to dominate regular Space Marines, but generally fall short when facing the absolute best champions of their legions. Next, we have Demon Tier, Marines enhanced by corruption, psychic power, or raw talent, to the point they can challenge the best of their legion and even clash with minor warp entities. They're monstrous either metaphorically or literally. Thirdly, we have Custodes Tier, Space Marines who can go toe-to-toe with the Emperor's personal bodyguard. These warriors display feats that place them at the extreme upper limits of what an Astartes can achieve through sheer skill, speed, strength, or supernatural enhancement. Our second highest tier is Greater Demon Tier. These Marines are no longer just simply warriors, they're capable of fighting greater demons and killing dozens with ease. They are both rare and terrifying. Finally, our highest tier is Low Primarch Tier. Few reach this level, but those who do stand on the edge of godhood. They can duel with Primarchs, if only briefly, overcome impossible odds, and are often the pinnacle of their legion's potential. I will be referring to this power pyramid throughout the video. As I rank each Space Marine, I will slot them in to the Cow's Power Pyramid. Let me know what you guys think of this. I hope it's a nice addition, because I feel like it's a great way to see where the Legionaries end up. So we've covered the ground rules, we should do a quick recap. A lightning round of every champion we picked in the last video, plus the few runner-ups who muscled their way onto the board. We'll go over each one's feats, powers, and why they're worth being here. Then, it's ranking time. Let's do this, guys. Representing the 1st Legion is none other than Corswain, the Lion Seneschal and one of the most decorated warriors of the Dark Angels during the Heresy. A knight to his core, Corswain was everything the Legion admired: disciplined, relentless, and absolutely lethal with a blade. He was a duelist, a hunter, and a commander who earned the respect of even his bitterest enemies. Corswain made his name during the infamous Thramas Crusade, where the Dark Angels clashed with the Night Lords in a brutal campaign of shadow warfare. It was there he famously stabbed Conrad Gers in the back, severely wounding the Night Haunter mid-fight. As the heresy dragged on, Corswain continued cutting down corrupted Astartes as he eventually made his way to Terra itself, where he would defend the Astronomicon, one of the Imperium's last lifelines, against the tides of the traitor onslaught, where he fought hundreds of Plague Marines. Later, during the fall of Caliban, Corswain even managed to defeat Cypher in single combat, at least if Luther's account is to be believed. It's a mysterious feat that sparked endless speculation, including the wild theory that Corswain might actually be Cypher himself in the 42nd Millennium. But we're not diving into that warp-tangled rabbit hole today. Corswain earns his place as a Dark Angel's top champion, not through just raw material skill, but through sheer consistency. Everywhere he went, he made an impact. Duels, battles, sieges, Corswain stood firm, a knight among killers, and one of the deadliest swordsmen of the entire heresy. Next up are the Emperor's Children, and yeah, I know I stirred up a lot of comments, but I'm sticking with my decision. Their champion is Lucius the Eternal, the twisted duelist who carved his way through the heresy with pure surgical skill and a lot of ketamine. Lucius was already a monster with a blade during the Great Crusade, and by the time of the heresy, he became outright terrifying. He defeated some of the best warriors the legions had to offer: Garviel Loken of the Luna Wolves, Erebus of the Wordbearers, Solomon Demeter of the Emperor's Children, and even Sanacht of the 1,000 Suns. His obsession with perfection, combined with his unhinged need for acknowledgement, made him one of the most deadly swordsmen of the era. Now yes, Lucius is technically immortal, thanks to a very cursed blessing from Slaanesh, but I'm not going to be factoring that into this ranking. Before you start screaming, "Gal, that's not fair!" His resurrection ability doesn't really come into play during the heresy, and it wouldn't be really fair to count plot armor that doesn't activate until after you die. Oh! So for our purposes in this video, this is only heresy era Lucius, the duelist who left a trail of champions and pieces behind him, not the loser in 40k who constantly gets hit in the face with a steel chair. And he probably likes it. After them, we have the Iron Warriors, the 4th Legion, and let me be honest guys, they're not exactly big on individual champions, or duels for that matter. Their whole thing was siege warfare, mass artillery, and grinding their enemies into dust with overwhelming firepower. They didn't glorify warriors, they glorified results. That said, we still did manage to crown a champion in the last video, and that was Forex, the warsmith of the Trident and one of the highest ranking and most feared commanders in the 4th Legion. Forex wasn't the flashiest fighter, but he was a monster in terms of survivability and sheer battlefield dominance. During the assault on the Lionsgate spaceport, he led a 1,000-strong Space Marine incursion into the spaceport itself. Eventually though, he and his group were slowly cut down until when the dust settled, Forex was the only one left standing. That kind of resilience, tactical brilliance, and sheer grit is what makes him the closest thing the Iron Warriors have to a true champion. Sure, he doesn't have a laundry list of legendary duels like Sigismund or Lucius, but that's not the Iron Warrior style. Forex is a war engine in power armor, calm, methodical, and utterly lethal. From here, we turn to the White Scars, and for the first time in this ranking, we've got 2 champions. While Targutai Usui officially takes the title, Jubal Khan was way too close to leave out. So yeah, he's coming along for the ride, And this won't be the last time we make this exception. Starting with Targutai, the chief Stormseer of the White Scars, this guy was on another level. He wasn't just some support psyker hiding in the back, he was out there turning entire squads, maybe even whole companies of traitor marines, into ash with the flick of his wrist. His biggest feat? He sat on a prototype version of the Golden Throne and used it to guide the entire White Scar fleet into the Webway. To put that into perspective, Malcador, one of the most powerful psychers alive, could barely survive the real thing for a single day. Targutai tanked it long enough to move an entire legion. It's pretty goddamn insane, fellas. Then, onto Jubal Khan, the Lord of the Summer Lightning, and one of the best swordsmen the Imperium had during the Heresy. He doesn't have any psychic powers or chaos boons, just raw dueling skill and speed. He went toe-to-toe with Sigismund and managed to hold his own for a while before losing, which says a lot. Later, he took on Abaddon, and although he lost, he seriously messed him up before going down. That alone earns him a spot here. Jubal was just that good. And come on, Lord of the Summer Lightning has got to be the coolest nickname I've ever heard in my cow life. Next up are the Space Wolves. And honestly, for a legion supposedly created to be the Emperor's executioners, they are surprisingly sparse when it comes to true standout champions during the Heresy. Most of their glory comes from their collective brutality, not individual duels. That said, there is one clear exception: Bjorn the Fell-Handed. Before becoming the legendary dreadnought we know in the current setting, Bjorn was a beast in the Heresy era. He was known for his ferocity and tactical instinct, cutting down 1,000-son sorcerers, Alpha Legion saboteurs, and demons of the warp in close combat. However, unlike many of the other champions we've looked at, Bjorn doesn't have a record of major one-on-one duels during the Horus Heresy. His strength was less about formalized combat and more about survivability. Still, his durability and the sheer list of powerful foes he faced earns him his spot as the Space Wolves' top contender. And now we come to the Imperial Fists and Sigismund, who absolutely deserves a longer spotlight. In the last video, we broke him down into 3 key forms: Great Crusade Sigismund, Horus Heresy Sigismund, and Black Knight Sigismund. But for this ranking, we're looking at his peak form: Black Knight Sigismund wielding the Black Sword. In the Great Crusade, he became first captain by defeating 200 Templars in single combat, ending this incredible run with defeating a Contemptor Dreadnought. He traded blows with warriors like Sevatar and Jubal Khan, and even fought beside Khârn in the World Eater pits. During the Horus Heresy, he led a purge of the Sol system, dueled Horus Aximon and cut off his hand, fought demons like Samus aboard the Phalanx, and became increasingly lethal. But it's at the Siege of Terra where he reached god tier status. After losing to Khârn at the Lionsgate spaceport, Sigismund receives the Black Sword, a relic forged on the Emperor's orders, whispering, impossibly heavy, and likely psycho-spiritually empowered. From that moment on, he's judgment incarnate. With the Black Sword, he rematches Khârn and kills him. He then begins to carve through Chaos champions like frickin' butter, killing multiple traitors of note. Ultimately coming across Euphrates Keeler, he leads refugees to the Astronomicon, where he would kill dozens of Death Guard warlords and lead one of the last defenses of the Hollow Mountain. With the Black Sword in hand, Sigismund becomes one of the most terrifying warriors in the entire Heresy, a man who took on Chaos at its peak and won. Now we turn to the Night Lords, and their champion is Jago Sevatar, the first captain of the Night Lords, the Prince of Crows, and the undisputed duelist of the 8th Legion. Sevatar basically ran the Night Lords after Khârn spiraled into madness, and he was one of the few Astartes with the guts to talk back to his Primarch and live. In terms of feats, let's start with the biggest one. He dueled Sigismund, the future Emperor's champion, from literally dusk till dawn. The fight ended in a technical loss to Sevatar, as headbutting is apparently bad manners and is illegal. But the fact he hung with Sigismund for hours straight is absolutely insane. He also defeated Alos, a champion of the Dark Angels, and, oh yeah, most importantly, he was a latent psyker, capable of seeing the future and throwing around telekinetic force, powers he actively suppressed out of loyalty to Khârn. Sevatar will be a fun one to rank as a great duelist and psyker, I just hope my final ranking doesn't make the Night Lord fans come to my house, beat me up, and flay me alive. Please, please, I'm just a gentle cow. For the Blood Angels, our champion is Nasir Ahmet, the original Flesh Terror and an absolute nightmare on the battlefield. Ahmet's greatest feats include defeating Cargo's Bloodspitter and going toe-to-toe with a pre-chaos empowered Khârn in a savage draw. The man was a berserker before the gene flaw even kicked in, more chainsword than soldier. Raldoron, first captain and the golden boy of the 9th Legion, is our honorable mention. Calm, composed, and deadly efficient, he dueled the Painted Count, a demon blade wielding monster of the Night Lords, and lived to tell the tale. A tactician, swordsman, and Sanguinius' right hand, Raldoron had it all, except that raw, unhinged fury that makes Ahmet our pick. And I've already discussed this, but keep this in mind, since we're ranking champions at their strongest, that means we're considering both of these Blood Angels at the peak of the Black Rage, fully consumed by the madness of Sanguinius' death, but far deadlier because of it. Representing the Iron Hands, we have Thos of the Fell Clan, a name that barely exists in the lore, but makes the list off the back of one legendary duel. This is one of those classic examples of why power scaling 30k is both awesome and completely stupid. Thos' only real feat is an honor duel against Sigismund, and for a time in that duel, he was actually winning. Thos held the advantage early on, pressing Sigismund hard until the Black Templar locked the fuck in, blitzed the 10th Legion's champion, and forced him to yield. After that, Thos promptly vanished into lore obscurity. So yeah, Thos' claim to fame is that he almost beat the greatest swordsman in the Imperium and then dipped. Silly? Absolutely. Impressive? Weirdly? Yeah. For the World Eaters champion, we have Khârn the Betrayer. And I mean, come on guys, who else do you think would be representing the 12th Legion? Like the other Chaos champions on this list, we're looking at peak Khârn at the height of the Siege of Terra, when he was basically juiced to the gills on corn warp juice. In this form, Khârn carved through loyalist champions and even defeated base Sigismund before he received the Black Blade. Khârn shows just how terrifying a Space Marine can become when they throw out all restraint and fully give in to the madness of chaos. Now, Khârn the Betrayer isn't the only World Eater we're going to be looking at today. I would have felt very silly if I did not include the Riven Hound as well, Mr. Indrid Har, who is rumored to be a literal Thunder Warrior. Har's greatest feat, outside of slaying traitors, takes place during the ambush at the Saturn Gate. He would face down against Abaddon after slaying several Justiri Terminators, and I'm honestly super excited to see where both of these World Eaters end up on my ranking. The Ultramarines are up next, and they've got the same problem the Iron Hands did, maybe even worse. Their champion, Ecos Lamiad, the Tetrarch of Karnor, was crowned based on a single feat, and that feat happened off screen. According to the lore, Ecos defeated base Abaddon in an honor duel during the triumph of Ulanor, and he did it in under 30 seconds. That's it. That's all we have. Just one vague line and a lot of implications. Once again, we're running into the pain of trying to power scale 30k characters. Because how do you fairly rank a guy who off-screen clapped Abaddon in under a minute against champions like Sigismund, Khârn, or Sevatar? Ecos is truly going to be a huge pain in the ass throughout this ranking. The Death Guard are up next, and their champion is none other than Typhus the Traveler, the man with the most diarrhea in 40k. But our runner-up is Nathaniel Garro. Both of these guys have one major thing in common. They've each stood toe-to-toe with their own Primarch, Mortarion. Typhus' greatest feat was dueling Mortarion during the events of Buried Dagger. He held out his own for a time before being struck down, but thanks to being the host of the Destroyer Plague, he's essentially immortal and regenerated from the fatal blow. Garro, on the other hand, managed to land 2 serious wounds on Mortarion before being killed, all while being empowered by the Emperor's Light. It's important to note that once again, we'll be judging them both at their peak. Typhus fully possessed by the Destroyer Plague, and Garro empowered by the Emperor's Light. Oh boy, I am excited for these two. Representing the 1,000 Suns, we have the infamous Azek Ahriman, Chief Librarian of the 15th Legion, as their champion. He's got a long list of insane feats, obliterating Ruin Priest, tearing open massive warp rifts, and even dueling a shard of Magnus himself, with a little help from a bound Chaos Fate Weaver. So in this video, we're not using Rubric era Ahriman or the one who cast a spell so powerful it affected every thousand sun across time and space. Instead, we're looking at Siege of Terra era Ahriman, when he's already deeply empowered by chaos, but still grounded enough to face off against our other contenders. Ahriman vs Targutai is going to be such a cool matchup later in this video, and I can't wait to dive into it. The Sons of Horus are up next, and our champion is none other than Abaddon, but I had to include my favorite boy, Garro Loken, as the runner-up. Leaving him out would have broken me emotionally. Abaddon, first captain of the Sons of Horus, boasts some of the most ridiculous list of victories in the 30k era. He's taken down Jubal Khan, Indrid Har, Bel Sepsidus, Loken, Zardu Lyak, and even held his own against fucking Constantine Valdor. On the other hand, we have Loken, and he is a beast in his own right. He defeated Tybalt Mar, Tormageddon, Horus Axmon, and even managed to put down a lesser form of Samus. For this list, we're going with their final forms as always, Chaos Empowered Abaddon, and a surprise entrance, Psychic Awakened Loken. Yeah, that's right guys, Loken started developing psychic powers towards the end of the Siege of Terra, and I really didn't want to geek about it in the last video, but yeah man, I love this guy. Just another reason to want to grab Erebus by his bald head and throw a fucking potato at his face.
Uh-oh, Richard!
The Wordbearers are up next, and their champion is unfortunately the bald-headed cunt Erebus. I know, he's the absolute worst. Let's grab him guys and throw him off a 50-store building because that's what he deserves. But because I have an unhealthy emotional attachment to my favorite senpai, Urgul Tao, he's tagging along as our runner-up. Erebus, for all his many flaws, has an absolute stacked resume. He's a skilled duelist, having defeated the likes of Loken and Horus Axmon. He wields the power of the warp and has control over the dark language of Annuncia. Urgul Tao, on the other hand, is one of the most tragic and badass figures in the Heresy. Sharing his body with the demon Ram, Urgul Tao was a terrifying presence on the battlefield with enhanced strength, durability, and even flight. His greatest feat was taking down a custodian in single combat, which is no small feat by any measure. This duo makes for a pretty wild contrast. The smug mastermind and the possessed warrior poet. I'm specifically hyped to see how Urgul Tao stacks up against some of the heavy hitters later on. The Salamanders are up next, and I have to be honest with you, Herd. I'm incredibly disappointed with how Games Workshop has treated our favorite cookout bros. For a Legion built on compassion, honor, and absolutely grilling heretics, they've been given almost nothing to work with in terms of standout characters. Their champion is Artillus Numan, and while he's not bad, he doesn't exactly light up the galaxy. His biggest feats include cutting down an unnumbered horde of demons, which is cool, don't get me wrong, but that's pretty much all we've got. Yes, I'm as disappointed as you are. They deserve better. Next up are the Raven Guard, and their champion is Nikona Sherokin, a name that stirs up a lot of mixed feelings. Some call him a Mary Sue, and honestly, they've got a point. This guy defeated Lucius the Eternal not once, but twice. Sherokin also has access to Wraith Slipping, a freakishly powerful ability that lets him phase into the shadows, basically turning him into a ghost mid-fight. For a duelist, that's insanely busted. Whether you love him or think he's overpowered fanfiction bait, you can't deny he's a beast on the battlefield. And finally, we come to the 20th Legion, the Alpha Legion, aka the Trust Issues faction. Their champion is Armillus Dynat, one of the few Alpha Legionaries who actually has a recorded duel, because most of them are too busy pretending they're Alpharius to bother with stuff like character development. The big reason Dynat gets his spot is his victory over Marius Gage, a solid fighter from the Ultramarines. That duel alone puts him above the rest of his super secretive, identity-shifting brothers. In a legion full of question marks and fake names, Dynat at least gives us something to work with. Alright, so we've got a grand total of 24 champions, 18 from the legions, and 6 runner-ups who clawed their way into the conversation. Before we start, I want you to race down to the comments and drop your predictions. Who do you think makes the top 3? Yes, you. I'm talking directly to you. Don't just sit there, type it out. I'll wait. Alright, now that we've got that taken care of, let's freaking do this, herd. We've got elite duelists, monstrous psychers, and warriors touched by the warp itself. Time to settle this once and for all. Who was the strongest space marine from the Horus Heresy? So here's how it's gonna work. I'm starting from the bottom and working my way to the top, ranking each champion from weakest to strongest and explaining my reasoning as we go. If you disagree, please yell at me in the comments, respectfully or not. I'm ready. If you agree with me though, just say you like milk or something. That works for me. For every champion, I'll break down their biggest feats and how they stack up against the others. I'm going to be as thorough as humanly possible, so this list actually makes some kind of sense because I know how feral 40k fans can get. After ranking each space marine, I will place them on my power pyramid so you guys can visually see which tier that specific space marine lands in. With all this said, guys, let's kick this off with number 24. This one, guys, is really easy, like suspiciously easy. Coming in at number 24 is Artillus Numan, first captain of the Salamanders and the weakest champion on this ranking. We all saw this coming. Artillus has no significant duels, and when he does end up fighting a Dark Apostle, a Word-Bearer's chaplain, he loses. I mean, killing demons is fun and all, but literally everyone else on this list has already done that or is capable of doing it. Rest in peace, Artillus, but you are the weakest one of the bunch. I'm sorry Nick Kime made you dolphin dive into a volcano to revive Vulcan. To this day, it still makes zero sense to me. Deathfire is a terrible book, guys. I feel like I don't need to explain myself further. In regards to the power pyramid, obviously, Artillus Numan slots in at the bottom of the Apex Marine tier. He is simply dead last. On to number 23. The next one too is honestly pretty easy. Like I stated earlier, and this might be a spoiler for the ranking, but whatever, the Alpha Legion struggle with the fact that we don't see any of the named Alpha Legion characters in action. And when we do, they're not dueling very significant foes that we can power scale. Thus, Armillus Dynat, Hero Master, comes in at number 23 on our list. Armillus has one significant duel we can look at, and it's against Marius Gage, first chapter master of the Ultramarines. And let me be brutally honest here, Marius Gage isn't really a great warrior. He loses his hand during the first moments of the Battle of Calth, which is honestly one of the only actual combat feats we have from him. Armillus defeats him in an honor duel during the Great Crusade, so we know Armillus is a pretty competent warrior, but that feat is still not that great. Still, I will admit, Armillus is a pretty damn cool space marine as he wields both a thunder hammer and a power sword at the same time. But with so many more heavy hitters on this list and just not enough credible feats to support him higher, I'm going to leave Armillus here at number 23. Sorry buddy, you're a really cool guy, but the rest are just simply cooler.
You're a cool guy, but you're not pulling your weight in the flat.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that I'm cool.
Before we move on to number 22, let's scale Dynat in the Chaos Power Pyramid. Similar to Artillus Numan, Dynat slides in the Apex Marine tier, just above the Salamander Captain. Damn, we're already flying through this, fellas. Maybe this won't take as long as I thought it would. Yeah, those are some famous last words. I totally jinxed myself. Oof. So number 22 in this ranking is going to be Kaidomor Foryx, Warsmith of the Iron Warriors. Now with Foryx, I'll admit guys, I messed up slightly. During the 30k era, Foryx did not destroy a Warhound Titan. That would come later in the 42nd Millennium, which means we can't count it. Yes, very sad indeed. But Foryx still has the absolute bonkers feat of infiltrating the Lionsgate spaceport with 1,000 dudes and surviving for weeks on end, even after being cut off from support. The guy fought against servitors, space marines, guardsmen, you name it, for a week in a citadel he had no knowledge of, and he still made it out alive. So although we can't count his Titan kill, Kaidomor Foryx is still one tough mother hecker. But like others behind him, he suffers from the same issue, no real significant duel or one of much prominence. So once again, Foryx lands at number 22 on our list. And just like the other two behind him, he lands in Apex Marine tier. Moving on. Alright, this one was a little more difficult than the last three, but I was still able to make a good decision without hours of soul-crushing debate. Don't worry, that's coming. Our number 21 spot goes to Thos of the Fell Clan. Yes, the one-time appearance Iron Hands champion, whose entire reputation is built on a single duel with base Sigismund during the Great Crusade. This was an honor duel, and to be fair to Thos, he actually did pretty damn well. He landed several blows on Sigismund, cracking his armor, breaking some fingers, and even smashing his helmet with a powered mace. So why is he this low? Well, he lost. The duel, as told in Sigismund the Eternal Crusader, lasts only a few moments. Sigismund rallies, breaks through Thos' defenses in just 3 strikes, and ends the fight with his blade literally in Thos' mouth, forcing him to yield. Now, this is where I need to explain base Sigismund, because a lot of champions on this list are going to be measured against him. Power scaling in 40k is rough, with different authors, retcons, and contradictions all over the place. So be gentle with me, I am just a silly gal. That said, throughout this video there are 3 characters I'll use as a baseline because of how prominent and consistently badass they are. Sigismund, who we're discussing now, Abaddon, who has fought 5 of the champions on this list, and Khârn, who's tangled with 3 of them. Each of these warriors is incredibly well documented, and they help ground the power scaling of the 30k setting. Now this fight with Thos is base Sigismund, meaning no Black Blade, no crusading bloodlust, and a mindset that's still firmly set in the Great Crusade's idealism. But even in this weaker state, Sigismund is still an absolute beast. I mean, the guy would go on to defeat Jubal Khan and take down 200 Templars in a row, with the final one being a literal Contemptor dreadnought. Yeah, base Sigismund is something else, guys. So Thos holding his own against that version of Sigismund, even for just a moment, is still impressive. But ultimately, he falls shortly after landing those hits, and that's just not enough to push him higher on this list. Still, not bad for a guy who only appeared once and then vanished. So where does he go in Kao's power pyramid? Well, to no one's surprise, he ends up in Apex Marine, ahead of the other 3 on this list. With that settled, let's move on to 20. This is where things get hard. There are so many beloved characters on this list that it becomes increasingly difficult to truly rank these Space Marines. I'm going to hurt a lot of feelings going forward, but alas, a gal's gotta do what a gal's gotta do. So number 20 is the next spot we're discussing. Like I just said, this one is tough, since the next couple guys all kinda share the same feats. They've all slain many traitor marines or demons, but once again, like I do with all my power scaling videos, I like to look at significant fights or duels to truly put one over the other. Is this method flawed? Yes, it sure is, but I believe it to be the most surefire way to power scale characters in 40k. Another important note is that some of these characters are just purely outclassed by other advanced forms of Space Marines. For example, Chaos Empowered Abaddon is obviously stronger than a lot of characters here due to him already being a monster without Chaos buffs, and thus when he receives them, he becomes far stronger than the others. So characters that don't receive any real form of power up or buff will most likely end up near the back end of the rankings, which I guess makes sense, but it's still pretty sad. I think I'm mostly depressed about who I had to put at number 20, which is why I wrote an entire paragraph processing my grief. Our number 20 spot goes to one of my favorite characters. He's a little lesser known Space Marine, but by far one of the cooler loyalists. Alright, before I just spoil him away, let's name him. Our number 20 spot goes to Endred Har, the Riven Hound. Yes, a very sad spot for one of the few loyalist World Eaters. A Black Shield who led his warband in constant guerrilla warfare against the traitors, he would meet his end during the Siege of Terra. So if he's so cool, why does he end up at number 20? Well, just like Thos above him, Har's one significant duel of note is against Abaddon during the book Saturn. Now this is base Abaddon, and honestly it's one of the greatest feats a Space Marine performs in the entire 30k series. Abaddon fights Garro, then Bel Sepstis, a fairly strong Blood Angels paladin, and then Endred Har, and he defeats all 3 of these guys. Garro's fight we'll discuss later in this video, wherever he ends up landing, but Har kinda just throws himself at Abaddon, grabbing him by the throat and smashing his face in with a power fist, not even bothering to defend himself. While he's doing this, he takes 7 killing strikes from Abaddon before finally going down. But even then, Abaddon remarks that one more power fist to the face would have finished him off. So yes, Har loses to Abaddon, but he gets really close to ending the would-be despoiler. In my eyes, the Rivenhound comes in at number 20 as he simply has a better showing against one of the stronger known Space Marines from the Heresy, unlike Thos, who was defeated after several moments. In regards to the power pyramid, Endred Har takes the last spot in the Apex Marine tier. So for the next couple champions ranked, they'll be moving up into the Demon tier, which means Endred Har takes the spot as the strongest of the Apex tier. Who will be 19? Make your bets, folks. Coming in at number 19 is another fan favorite, Jubal Khârn. I know. How is one of the finest swordsmen of the Great Crusade in the Horus Heresy this far back on the list? Well, hear me out, guys. Jubal is in a similar boat as Endred Har and Thos. Guys with undeniable skill, but who ultimately fall short when matched up against the heavy hitters. Jubal does fight both Sigismund and Abaddon, and while he loses in both bouts, he puts up an amazing fight. He wounds Sigismund, breaks his jaw, and lands a flurry of blows on Abaddon, forcing both champions to really work for their wins. He easily outperforms others who lost to the same duo, but despite how strong he probably is, we don't have enough definitive winning duels or feats to push him higher. It's a painful placement, but I can't build the ranking on pure assumptions alone. Jubal Khârn, though, does take the first spot in the Demon tier, making him the first selection above the Apex Marines. And now, on to number 18. This one is gonna upset a lot of you fans, especially fans of a certain legion. Very controversial pick for number 18. Like, I'm probably going to get screamed at by a vast majority of the fandom right here, but whatever. Let me first once again state, like I did with Forex, that we are only counting feats from 30k and nothing past the Scouring, so feats following it are not going to be counted. This specific character has some pretty great feats following the Heresy, and like Forex, I once again confused them for feats that occurred during 30k. I apologize. They are still the champion of their legion, but their feats pale in comparison to the rest of the fellas on this list. As you can tell, I'm really trying to defend myself before even dropping the Space Marine. I'm actually so terrified, but I guess I've got to say it at some point. Coming in at my number 18 spot is Bjorn the Fell-Handed. Yes, before you stab me with a sharp fork and try to milk me, let me explain first. Now, this isn't Space Wolf's hate, even if you think it is. In fact, there's an argument to be made that based on his 30k feats, we should move him back even further. First off, Bjorn's greatest feat that I discussed in the previous video was not from the time period we were investigating. It came from the book Prospero Burns, where Bjorn faces down against a demon called the Horus thing. Yeah, very original Games Workshop. I mean, it's literally a demon that took the name of Horus and looks like him. I guess the name kinda makes sense. Now, we don't really know if the Horus thing is a greater demon or a lesser demon, but it does know Enuncia, which is the reality-shaping language deployed by cunts like Erebus. The Horus thing manages to defeat several other Space Marines before facing down against Bjorn, who manages to wound it severely and even cleaves off its arm before Bjorn loses his own arm in return. After this, he is pretty much at its mercy before a squad of Sisters of Silence and 2 Dreadnoughts emerge to finish off the demon. Now, like I just said, we don't exactly know if this demon was a greater demon or a common demon, but with it knowing Enuncia and it being fairly competent at hiding, I would argue it's a greater demon of chaos. Some say it's a changeling, but I don't know if there's enough evidence to say that. Either way, the Horus thing is still quite powerful. It seems to have direct control over beings whose names it knows. Of course, Bjorn has been known as Bear throughout the book, and thus is unaffected by its warp power.
Oh, well, isn't that convenient?
So before you guys even ask the question in the comments, how is Bjorn not higher if he yet again tingled with the greater demon and lived to tell the tale? Well, I have a couple reasons that this fight is not as good of a feat as it seems on paper. First, Bjorn was not the first Space Wolf to fight the Horus thing. Several Space Wolves were defeated before Bjorn joined the fight, and the significance of this is the Horus thing was already wounded when Bjorn entered the fight, as it was already severely bleeding with a large gash in its thigh and gut by a strike from Godsmoke, a fellow squad member of Bjorn. Second, Bjorn does not even kill the demon. He barely defends his ward, Casper Hawker, from being killed and does manage to dish out a terrible amount of damage upon the demon, but it's not enough as he loses his arm. I will admit though, still greatly wounding and surviving a duel with a greater demon is not nothing. This duel probably set Bjorn up to succeed later when he slew the greater demon of Khârn after the Scouring ended. But once again, to all those Space Wolf fans, we are not counting that. Yes, deal with it. Now the real question is, does Bjorn have any other feats throughout the Heresy? No, he does not. I'm going down a rabbit hole here to defend myself because I feel like it's valid. The Space Wolves get literally next to no spotlight during the Horus Heresy and thus have little to no named characters in said heresy. I'm not kidding. I discussed this in the previous video, but to put it simply, fuck it. Let's talk about it again. The Space Wolves are involved in the beginning of the heresy with Prospero Burns, but after that, they are hardly involved. Why? Because they are crippled by their own stupid actions. But more importantly, the horrible writing by GW, which makes Leman Russ make some of the most idiotic decisions a being can make. Don't try to defend Games Workshop Space Wolf fans, accept it. Alexius Nebula, Tricyclon, Urant, all massive failures for the Space Wolves that by the end of the heresy, their legion is basically already chapter sized. It's fucking flabbergasting. Every time they are seen, it's literally doing something so stupid it makes me question my own sanity.
Are you stupid or something? I'm as stupid as a stupid does.
So how does this relate to Bjorn not having another feat? Well, since they don't have a ton of spotlight, and as a legion they functionally stop existing towards the end of the heresy, Bjorn kinda gets left to the side till post-heresy. He does end up fighting a dreadnought during the Alexius Nebula campaign, but I'm not lying, neither him or his whole squad together can bring it down. Remember folks, base Sigismund defeated a Condemptor dreadnought. So get out of here. Get the hell out of here! Bjorn is definitely on the weaker side of Space Marine champions I've nominated, but if it's a small win for Space Wolf fans, Bjorn does end up in the demon tier ahead of Jubal Khan. Whew, glad we're done with Bjorn. The next ranking absolutely made me want to shoot myself in the foot though. I spent a whole day debating this one, and I know I'm going to get a lot of shit for this, but I'm sticking with my pick. So once again, just be gentle with me guys. I'm just looking at the feats for crying out loud. Coming in at number 17 is another character no one knows anything about. Put down your bets people, you're not going to get it. Ecos Lamiad, the Ultramarines champion, is ranked 17th on this list. This one was so freaking hard guys, solely because Ecos is the one-trick pony. His one and only feat is the defeat of Abaddon. Granted, this is only base Abaddon, but this version is still quite powerful. I will go more in depth into Abaddon later in this video, obviously since Abaddon gets stronger due to the buffs of Chaos, but in his base form, Abaddon beats Garro of the Death Guard, Belsepsis of the Blood Angels, Indrid Har of the World Eaters, Loken of the Luna Wolves, and Jubal Khan of the White Scars. All monsters, with almost all of them being on this list. So why is Ecos not ahead of Loken and Garro? Well, both of these characters get more amp forms later in 30k, which in my opinion puts them above Ecos. I mean, there's also the fact that this is the only feat we have for Ecos. The feat isn't even seen either, it's merely spoken about from the book Vengeful Spirit. I will read the excerpt because it's literally shorter than a paragraph. I'm gonna channel my inner Abaddon. Give me a second. Always late for the fight, Ezekiel had roared, strutting like a peacock. The challenge had come from a sword champion named Ecos. and Ezekiel had accepted. He had a head of height on the slender Ultramarine, but Ecos had him on his back in under a minute. That's it, guys. That's literally it. That's the feat I'm talking about. But still, defeating Abaddon that fast is pretty impressive. Outside of significant duels, Ecos also fought during the Battle of Calth, severely wounded, and was able to slay a vast amount of corrupted traitor marines with only one arm. Now, I can hear the Space Wolf fans howling at me. Why did I put him ahead of Bjorn? Well, in my opinion, base Abaddon scales far, far beyond Bjorn, and if Ecos could defeat him, then Ecos is definitely more powerful. It's just simply comparing feats. Ecos defeated Abaddon, Bjorn, failed to kill a greater demon but survived. I feel like that speaks for itself. Honestly, all Bjorn, Ecos, and the next guys are all very close in ranking. I think I scaled them correctly, but it could really go either way. Similar to the last two, Ecos slides into demon tier, just ahead of Bjorn and Jubal Khan, which I feel like is a pretty good spot for them. Coming in at number 16 is a very hated character. I hate him too, but let me tell you, he's got a perfect head of hair. Lucius the Eternal is our number 16th ranked strongest Space Marine. A very interesting spot to put Lucius the Eternal, who in turn is a very interesting Space Marine. A lot of people dunk on him, but like I stated in the last video, he has a lot of notable victories and feats, which definitely make him one of the strongest Marines from the Heresy era. Now for those definitely asking, wait, how is Lucius the Eternal number 16? Shouldn't he be technically immortal and thus unkillable? Well, yes, but, well, we don't explicitly see this power take a hold of him till after the Heresy. It is very confusing though, I will admit, as Nykoa Shuriken manages to kill him, but instead of being taken over, Lucius just regenerates and awakens in Fabius Bile's lab. It's not explicitly stated once again if Slaanesh did this or Fabius Bile did, but like I stated, after the Heresy, he definitely gains his immortal curse from Slaanesh as he dies and takes over the champion who killed him. So either way, it doesn't matter if Lucius is immortal during the Heresy or not, we're not going to count it, since it wouldn't take effect until after combat, as opposed to Typhus, who would be able to regenerate during said combat. So with that out of the way, why does Lucius come in at number 16? Let's go over his feats. He has several very notable victories. He defeats Garviel Loken of the Luna Wolves, Commander Azkalan of the Sanguinary Guard, Erebus of the Wordbearers, Solomon Demeter of the Emperor's Children, and Sanacht of the 1,000 Suns. But he does end up losing to Nykoa Shuriken and Sigismund during the Siege of Terra. Shuriken actually defeats him twice, granted with using his Wraith Slipping abilities, which are practically broken. I will be diving more into those later in the video. And then the bout with Sigismund happens off screen, but it's very expected for Sigismund to defeat Lucius as well, as Sigismund is at the height of his power and skills, killing various traitor champions. And in regards to the power pyramid, Lucius takes the next spot in the demon tier ranking. So pretty much to summarize, Lucius has quite a lot of victories, and especially when empowered by Slaanesh, he becomes one of the most deadly Chaos Marines, but the ones ahead of him are clearly stronger than him. Thus, the perverted boy of Mommy Slaanesh comes in at number 16. The next one was tough, and I feel like I've said that every single time now, but it really was tough. I was debating between the now number 15 and the number 14 spots for quite some time, and they're really super close. Don't kill me, fellas. Coming in at number 15 is the man, the myth, the absolute Chad, and one of the most beloved characters from the Horus Heresy, Garviel Loken. Yes, Garviel Loken comes in at number 15. The loyalist Luna Wolf, who was a fan favorite from 30K, and easily one of the coolest Space Marines from this time period. By the end of the siege, he's wielding 3 goddamn swords. His signature chainsword, Tylos Rubio's Force Sword, and Horus Aximon's Great Power Sword mourn it all. What an absolute inventory. Loken's got some solid feats too. He slays several key traitors like Horus Aximon, Tormageddon, a possessed Space Marine, Tybalt Mar, and even defeats a lesser form of Samus, a greater demon of ruin, during the Solar War. That's a pretty stacked record, and it marks a clear divide between him and those ranked above him. But Loken also takes some key L's which hold him back. He fails to defeat Abaddon, first captain of the Sons of Horus, and Lucius the Eternal in an honor duel, both of whom are major powerhouses. Now, if you recall earlier in the video, we mentioned Psychic Empowered Loken. This version of him shows up later in the Siege of Terra, Specifically, during the events of Saturn, where Loken seems to awaken his latent psychic abilities during his fight with Tormageddon. The full extent of his powers is unclear, but the best guess I have is that they simply enhance his physical stats, making him stronger and faster than his base form, and that he possibly has the ability to communicate with others across dimensions and worlds. But that is just a theory. So what does Psychic Awaken Loken do? Well, not a lot. He defeats Tormageddon and then Horus Heresy soon after awakening his powers, but we don't see him unleash any new psychic abilities during these duels. Later, during the end and the death, Loken faces Samus yet again. This time, it's a more complete manifestation of the demon, since the Vengeful Spirit and Terra are now deep in the warp. Armed with Tylos Rubio's Foresword, Loken banishes Samus yet again. Wait, hold on, Cal. You just said Loken defeated a greater demon not once, but twice. Shouldn't he be higher on this list? Well, let me tell you guys, in both cases, the fights are just simply whack.
His hair, whack. His gear, whack. His jewelry, whack. His footsteps, whack.
In the first fight, Samus is barely manifested, while the real version is off fighting Rogel Dorn in the Phalanx. In the second fight, Loken is aided by Helic Mirror, a literal random-ass police officer who somehow reads aloud Samus's lore mid-fight. Loken apparently hears this psychically and uses it to kill Samus.
What?
Yeah, I don't get it either. It makes no sense. I'm chalking that one up to Loken's newly awakened powers. So yes, Loken defeats Samus twice, but each time he's either fighting a lesser version or getting help. That, combined with his losses to Abaddon and Lucius, hold him back a lot. He's still a monster duelist and an absolute fan favorite, and I just wish we saw more of him after his psychic awakening. I mean, he almost became a Grey Knight, guys. Loken also ends up in the Demon tier, just ahead of Lucius the Eternal, as Loken is clearly more powerful in his Psychic Awakened form, and in my opinion, could easily best the bald-headed weirdo. Alright, let me grab my tissues real quick. Let's continue this insane ranking with number 14, a pick no one will expect, but everyone will understand. Almost halfway through, coming in at number 14 is Nykona Shuriken. Whoa, what was that? Why did I just hear a bunch of birds start cawing? Sorry, that was a bad joke. Nykona is ranked number 14 on our list and is one of the greatest Raven Guard from the Horus Heresy. He fought from the Dropside Massacre all the way to the Siege of Terra. Shuriken is a tricky one. Like a few other champions on this list, his claim to fame and the reason he's so high is his absolute destruction of Lucius the Eternal. Shuriken fought Lucius twice, and in both battles, Lucius got absolutely clowned on. This is the same Lucius who beat Loken, Sanacht, Erebus, Ascalon, and a bunch of other heavy hitters, and Nykona just beats the shit out of him. So how does he do it? Wraith Slipping. Wraith Slipping lets Shuriken blend into the shadows so completely that he becomes invisible, essentially ghosting through reality itself. During their duels, Lucius couldn't touch him. It was like trying to sword fight a shadow. Shuriken also killed the Alpha Legion champion, Ashir Masan, during the Heresy, but we know next to nothing about that guy. But what is notable is that Alpharius himself watched their duel and said he was surprised Shuriken won. That's like hearing Gordon Ramsay say he's shocked your grilled cheese was good.
What are you?
An idiot sandwich.
On the subject of Alpharius, no, Shuriken did not fight him as many think he did. They simply had a Mexican standoff, and Alpharius walked away, telling Shuriken that Magnus had asked Alpharius to let Shuriken live. A short explanation for why that happened is that later, Shuriken would successfully retrieve the Magna Marta from Luna before its fall during the Solar War. The Magna Marta is a genetic template of all the Primarchs, which would be used later to create the Primaris Marines. Why Magnus did this is pretty much unknown, but back to Shuriken. Why is he number 14 on this list when he can Wraith Slip like a freaking ghost? Well, to put it frankly, this is the end of the Demon tier. Shuriken defeated Lucius the Eternal in single combat, but I truthfully don't think that either Shuriken or Lucius scale to the next heavy hitters on this list. Remember, we're looking at Space Marines who are empowered by the warp, their genetic defects, and simply PTSD. All my Raven Guard fans, you'll understand why Shuriken is 14 in literally a few seconds. On to number 13, and the first of which I call Custodes tier. Pretty much everyone except for one or two exceptions are empowered or buffed in some way moving forward, and in my eyes, could most likely kill a Custodes. Yes, I mean that. Let's get into it. Alright, number 13. Who knew debating fictional characters from books would be so frickin' hard? But alas, here we are. It's been one hell of a journey. Our next Space Marine, and who comes in at number 13, is Raldoron, first captain of the Blood Angels, and remember, due to the rules in place, all the Blood Angels on this list, Nazir Ahmed included, are in their Black Rage forms, which is the peak of their power. So why does Raldoron come in at number 13 lower on our list? Well, for starters, Raldoron is exclaimed as one of the greatest swordsmen of the 30k era, and I'm not saying that isn't true, but when we see him fight during the Siege of Terra, it leaves me thinking otherwise. Raldoron's greatest feat, which is sad enough as it is not even a victory. During the events of the Lost and the Damned, as the Night Lords attack the walls of the Imperial Palace, the Blood Angels fight back, resulting in Raldoron squaring off against Jendor Scrivok, the Painted Count who wields a demon-possessed blade. For context, Jendor is no pushover when equipped with this blade, as he was able to defeat Shang, Equerry de Curse, and cut through several Blood Angels before finally confronting the first captain. So how does this fight go? Well, Raldoron draws with Scrivok, able to hold his own, but clearly on the defensive. At this point, the demon leaves Jendor, which results in the Painted Count losing and getting flung off the wall like a total loser. But what we gain from this is that Raldoron can't beat a demon-possessed Space Marine. I know the Raven Guard fans are staring at their screens with complete and utter rage. But remember folks, this isn't base Raldoron we're looking at Raldoron utterly consumed by the Black Rage. Before we continue, let's discuss what the Black Rage is. The Black Rage is a unique and tragic genetic flaw that affects the Blood Angels. It causes those afflicted to suffer vivid hallucinations, reliving the death of their Primarch Sanguinius. When overcome by the rage, a warrior believes he is Sanguinius, fighting against Horus. This madness renders them uncontrollable and extremely violent. Outside of the PTSD injected into their veins, the Blood Angels afflicted gain several insane buffs: insane strength, ferocity, pain resistance, and each Blood Angel is additionally described as gaining Sanguinius' memories and being imbued with a small portion of his unearthly power. Yeah, the Black Rage is kinda stupidly broken. So what does Raldoron accomplish in this form? While Raldoron accompanies the Emperor, Dorn, Sanguinius, and Valdor when they board the Vengeful Spirit at the height of the Siege of Terra. When Sanguinius dies, the Blood Angels aboard the Vengeful Spirit and on Terra jump into rage and begin to massacre friend and foe alike. Raldoron's only real appearance during the rage is him and his men blindsiding the Justeri, Abaddon's elite Terminator company, who have just accepted the buffs of chaos. And even more insane, these Terminators were going toe-to-toe with Custodes. And guess what? Raldoron and his men smashed through them. I'm not kidding, with their enhanced powers, we see them cut through these Terminators like straight up butter. Erebus is also present and attempts to use Enuncia, you know, that reality warping language on the horde of Blood Angels. But, funnily enough, it completely fails as the Blood Angels seem immune to his speech, which I feel like both implies that Erebus has definitely not mastered Enuncia completely, and that the Blood Angels are so deranged and psychically afflicted by the rage that it can't affect them. What's even more interesting is that the Blood Angels weren't only fighting the Justeri on the Vengeful Spirit, they were also fighting corrupted Wordbearers and even more insane, Custodes. Now we don't exactly see Raldoron kill a Custodes, but when we later see the Custodes who fought in the skirmish, only 3 survived. I know this is a rough assumption, but I feel like it's implied that Raldoron and his Blood Angels did more than just kill corrupted Marines. But still, some pretty crazy feats from Raldoron. He's immune to Enuncia, kills several corrupted Justeri. Remember, these Justeri were fighting literal Custodians moments earlier with their chaos buffs, and it's implied that he killed a Custodes himself. Yes, I think it's very justified that Raldoron comes in at number 13 for not being able to kill the Painted Count to possibly killing Custodians. Wow, the Black Rage is quite the buff. All the guys from here on out are pretty nuts. So it's pretty easy to slide Raldoron in to the Custodes tier. Make your bets, people, make your bets. Who will join him in a few minutes? Am I vindicated, Raven Guard fans? Alright, on to number 12. Coming in at number 12, we have another fan favorite, Argyll Tau, the Crimson Lord of the Galvorback, and my personal favorite, Buki. Argyll Tau is a pretty intriguing case. He was prophesied by Erebus to grow more and more powerful until he rivaled a Primarch in size and strength, where he would eventually duel and die to Sanguinius during the Siege of Terra. Obviously, we won't be considering that hypothetical version of Argyll Tau since it never actually happened. Tragically, Argyll Tau doesn't even make it out of the Shadow Crusade, getting stabbed in the back by the cunt lord himself, Erebus. Classic word bearers.
Yeah, you suck. Yeah, you just fucking suck.
So what puts Argyll Tau at our number 12 spot? Argyll Tau was one of the first Space Marines possessed by a demon, in his case, bonded with the warp entity named Rom. This possession granted him vastly enhanced strength, speed, and even flight, and while that makes him sound like he doesn't have many feats, that's honestly an understatement. Argyll Tau was cutting through loyalist Space Marines like paper during the Dropside Massacre. He was just an absolute monster in combat. However, it's heavily implied that he still scaled far below Primarch level, as it's stated that if he faced Corvus Corax directly, he would have lost. Argyll Tau did fight Custodians, twice in fact, and each time he came out on top. But if you look closer, he never fought them alone. He always had backup from his fellow possessed word bearers. For example, at the end of the first Heretic, Argyll Tau and 11 of his demon-possessed brothers face off against 3 Custodies. Only 5 of those word bearers survive. That's still a brutal and impressive fight, and just like with Raldoron, I think it's implied Argyll Tau could take on a Custodes one-on-one, but we just never get a proper solo duel to confirm it. Ultimately, Argyll Tau suffers from the lack of one-on-one feats against high-tier opponents, and I mean the dude was supposed to fight Sanguinius. Can you imagine that? That would have launched him into top tier instantly, but nope. Erebus had to go full traitor goblin mode and rob us of that moment. Argyll Tau has the power, the speed, the demon wings, but he just lacks the confirmed solo feats to push him over the edge. But I think it's pretty easy to interpret that Argyll Tau slides into Custodes tier just above Raldoron of the Blood Angels. And that brings us to our number 11 spot, the final Marine before cracking the top 10. Who just missed the cut? Coming in at number 11, we have the other Blood Angel. Yes, Nasir Ahmet, engrossed the Black Rage, comes in at our next spot. Another Black Rage monster, enhanced by his gene flaw and PTSD, Nasir Ahmet was a champion I selected for the Blood Angels, and what a champion he is. Base Nasir Ahmet has 3 feats that solidify his spot. The first happens sometime during the Great Crusade, where Nasir Ahmet and Khârn duel to a draw. Yes, Khârn, the champion of the World Eaters, who has not yet been ranked. Ooh, foreshadowing. Why is this such a big feat? Well, let's do a power scaling deep dive, shall we? So base Khârn scales below base Sigismund, since it took the powers of Khârn for Khârn to defeat Sigismund during the Siege of Terra, which objectively implies that Nasir Ahmet in his Black Rage form is somewhere close to base Sigismund. Obviously, that's a huge assumption, so I can't exactly take that as truth, but Nasir is somewhere in that ballpark. His second significant feat occurred during the Cygnus Prime campaign. As the Blood Angels gave into the Red Thirst, Nasir slaughtered and devoured a whole squad of Space Wolves. A less impactful feat, but still a solid showing of how strong a Marine Nasir is. The third and final feat occurs during the Siege of Terra, and it goes without saying that Nasir has been slaying corrupted Marines throughout the siege, but his most impactful feat during this is his defeat of Cargos Bloodspitter. Not once, but twice. Cargos, empowered by the bloodlust of Khârn, can do nothing to Nasir as he tells him to eat shit and cuts his throat. I see this as Sigismund Light versus Khârn Light. Kind of a funny comparison, but still on the nose. So Nasir is able to slay corrupted Marines with ease, and even drew with Khârn in his base form. So you can guess this man became a monster when he enters the Black Rage. Remember, the Black Rage enhances a Space Marine way beyond their heights, giving them enhanced strength, ferocity, pain resistance, and potentially psychic resistance, as each Blood Angel is imbued with a small portion of Sanguinius himself. Nasir does not face as impressive of enemies as Raldoron does aboard the Vengeful Spirit, but he does create a literal mound of traitor and loyalist Space Marines, killing so many that the hallways he fought in were utterly drenched in gore and blood. Simply put, Nasir Ahmed is that guy, and just misses the number 10 spot. Oh, how sad. We're beginning the home stretch. Let's get to number 10. You know how I just said that most of the guys on the rest of this list are going to be empowered or buff versions of themselves? Well, I lied. Our number 10 spot is a still normal, loyal Space Marine. He's just too fucking good. Corswain, the Hound of Caliban, comes in at number 10. Said to be one of the greatest swordsmen in 30k, and I honestly agree. No chaos buffs, no emperor empowerment, just a literal guy with a sword, and let me tell ya, this guy gets shit done.
That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
Corswain fights in the thick of the heresy, from the Thramas Crusade all the way to the end of the Siege of Terra, battling everything from corrupted marines to the insane predators of the warp. But what are his biggest feats that make him stand out and put him at number 10 on our list? Starting off, let's talk about what's said of Raldoron. Raldoron is remarked to be one of the strongest swordsmen in 30k. And yeah, I probably said that a gazillion times throughout this video, and while you all know on this channel, we usually don't take stated facts into account, which I know makes so many cows angry, but hey, Papa Cow said so, guys. Still, it seems like every character who is stated to be one of the best swordsmen in the Imperium has ended up on this list, so I guess there's some worth in those statements after all. Let's look at Corswain's actual feats. To set a baseline for the Hound of Caliban, he defeated Alos, Master of the Ninth Order and a fellow Dark Angel in single combat. Why is this important? Well, Alos himself had some pretty insane feats, two of which are very noteworthy. Brace yourself. Alos held off Lionel Johnson, yes, the Primarch, for a whole minute. That is an incredible feat. And that's not even the end of it. Alos later takes on Sevatar and loses, but let me set the stage first. Corswain has abandoned the fight between Alos and himself against Sheng and Sevatar to save the lion, who, to put it politely, is getting his face absolutely bashed in by Gunrad Gurs. Alos then takes on both Sheng and Sevatar at the same time, and this fight ends with him getting decapitated. Rest in peace. So what does this all mean? Well, if we're using basic power scaling logic, which can get very muddled, I know Corswain scales above Alos, which would imply Corswain would be capable of fighting the lion in single combat for a time at least, and could potentially take on Sevatar. The same Sevatar who fought Sigismund over the course of several hours, with their duel ending in a draw of sorts. We'll get into more details on that duel later. So what does Corswain do besides hang on Alos' feats? Well, he did manage to stab Gunrad Gurs in the back, which isn't that impressive since he snuck up behind him, but it shows that Corswain is strong enough to penetrate, I put that very sexually, with his blade and leave it lodged in the Night Hunter's spine. That was incredibly sexual. Wow, I didn't mean for that. Has someone ever written a fan fiction of Corswain and... okay, I'm gonna shut up. Corswain would ultimately end up at the Siege of Terra, leading his own force of Dark Angels to relight the Astronomicon. He didn't have a single significant duel here, but throughout the siege, he slaughtered hundreds, and I mean literally hundreds, of corrupted Plague Marines. For those who don't know, Plague Marines are incredibly durable, regenerate, and are hard to put down due to the amount of diseases they carry. But that doesn't stop Corswain from cutting through them. Lastly, the most significant feat Corswain has, which is honestly pretty sad, I wish he actually fought Sevatar or Typhus, but alas, comes during the fall of Caliban. As the Dark Angels make planetfall against their traitorous fallen kin, Corswain was described by the Fallen as being death itself. During this battle, Corswain would fight Cypher, who at this time was Zariel El Zaras. For those who didn't watch my last video, Zahariel is capable of 4 psychic abilities. He could perceive time slower, letting him move faster than others could detect. He could phase his body through the warp itself, becoming intangible. He had X-ray vision that worked even when blind, and he could boost his stamina and energy reserves. And yet, even with all this at his disposal, Corswain still defeated him in single combat. What a frickin' feat. Which also makes me think Corswain is Cypher in the current era, but we can discuss that in another video. This also shows to everyone that yes, a duelist Space Marine can defeat a Psyker in single combat. This easily shows that Corswain lands in our Custodes tier spot. just ahead of Nasir Amit, Raldoron, and Argol Tau. So Corswain begins the countdown to number 1, coming in at number 10. I'm really happy that Dark Angels got some love here, and it's even crazier that with Space Marines running around with chaos buffs, psychic powers, and magic swords, Corswain still makes the top 10 list through pure skill alone. Alright, moving on to number 9. Who's our number 9 spot? Well, let me give you a hint. He's got one shiny melon. That's right, Nathaniel Garro, captain of the 10th Company of the Death Guard and Knight Errant of Malcador, lands at number 9 on this list. With Typhus still to be ranked, it's pretty wild that both Death Guard champions cracked the top 10 list. Let's look at base Garro first. He defeated and banished the Lord of Flies on Luna, a greater demon who had already slain multiple Sisters of Silence and Death Guard. He defeated a chaos-corrupted Vindicator assassin, and he defeated a Custodes in single combat. Yeah, he defeated a fucking Custodes, guys. I bet you didn't know that one. During the Saturn Gambit, Garro would also face Falcus Kyber, a corrupted Justiri Terminator, and kill him with relative ease. Garro would also face Abaddon in single combat, but I'm not gonna lie here, Garro got absolutely face bashed. Abaddon would go on to beat Bel Sepstis and Endrinhar as well, defeating all 3 warriors. So why is Garro still this high on the list even though he couldn't take down base Abaddon? It all comes down to Garro's most impressive feat, his duel with Demon Prince Mortarion, Primarch of the Death Guard. Even in his base form, Garro was able to briefly contend with the Demon Prince and managed to wound him. After this though, Mortarion immediately tried to end the fight, declaring he would claim Garro's corpse in Nurgle's name. This moment marks the emergence of Garro Emperor Empowered, a brief yet dramatic transformation triggered by Euphrates Keeler's divine intervention. Bathed in the Emperor's light, Garro's physical and spiritual attributes were greatly elevated. He fought with greater speed, strength, and fury, shrugging off wounds that would have downed him moments before. While he was ultimately still defeated, he held his ground against Mortarion longer than any mortal should have, and even dealt a grievous wound to the Demon Primarch by jamming the shadow remains of Libertas into his throat. This moment of defiance cements Garro's place as one of the few warriors in history to significantly harm a Primarch in single combat, solidifying Emperor-empowered Garro as a new and terrifying potent form, and the reason why he comes in at number 9. Here, we reach the end of the Custodes tier and step into what I call the Greater Demon tier. These next few Space Marines are so juiced, they could go toe-to-toe with the Greater Demon of Chaos and maybe even walk away the winner. So who's sitting pretty at number 8? Well, let me give you a hint. Everyone hates him, he's bald, but not the noble righteous bald like Garro. No, this guy's bald in the bad type of way. Yes, the most punchable face in all of 30k, the architect of the Horus Heresy, and the most hated word bearer, even more than Corfarion. Erebus, the word bearer's first chaplain, comes in at number 8. But as much as we all love to hate him, Erebus isn't just a scheming manipulator, he's an absolute unit when it comes to raw power, both material and arcane. Let's talk feats. Erebus is a decent duelist, managing to defeat both Garvio Loken and Little Horus Axeman. No small task considering Loken's own resume. However, when he faces Lucius the Eternal and Khârn the Betrayer, he does get thoroughly styled on, showcasing that while his swordplay is solid, he's not at the top of the pile when it comes to pure martial prowess. Where Erebus truly shines is in warp manipulation and occult knowledge, especially his use of Enuncia, the forbidden reality warping language we discussed earlier. This language allows the user to bend the laws of the universe, and Erebus uses it with terrifying effect. Here's a quick breakdown of what Erebus does with Enuncia and sorcery. He kills multiple Space Marines using warp reality breaking words alone. He defeats Erda, the perpetual mother of the Primarchs, in direct combat. That alone is a feat few can claim. In his biggest sorcery showcase, Erebus uses Enuncia to deflect attacks, immobilize enemies, and ragdoll a kill team of perpetuals. Showing just how devastating this forbidden power can be, he also demonstrates mild regeneration, enduring wounds, and continuing to fight. His greatest dueling feat remains the defeat of pre-enhanced base Loken, but in terms of versatility and threat level, Erebus punches far above his weight class. So why isn't he ranked higher? Despite wielding one of the most potentially broken abilities in the 40k universe, Erebus lacks full mastery over Enuncia. Those consumed by the Black Rage, for example, seem to be unaffected by his powers, showing that his use of the language has its limits. He's also shown to be insecure in his knowledge, constantly seeking more words of power throughout the end and the death. His command of Annuncia is dangerously strong, but still incomplete, which ultimately holds him back from climbing any higher on this list. Make no mistake though, Erebus is still a threat, he just has to fully master Annuncia first. So with his incomplete knowledge of Annuncia, and his alright dueling skills, I have no choice but to put him at number 8. Coming in at number 7, and just off by 1, it would have been so iconic, is Khârn the Betrayer. And Khârn is one of the most unique characters on this list, because his pre-chaos feats are actually pretty limited. During the Great Crusade, he does go toe-to-toe with Nasir Amit, the original Flesh Terror, and fights him to a draw, which already says a lot, and later he absolutely brutalizes Erebus, who we just covered in a savage beatdown, that left the Dark Apostle barely alive. But that isn't the peak form we're looking at. No, the version of Khârn we're ranking is the one who's fully given himself over to the blood god Khorne. Once a disciplined warrior, Khârn finally succumbs to the Butcher's Nails and becomes the bloodthirsty avatar of the 12th Legion's descent into madness. Let's talk about what that means, because Khorne doesn't just make you angrier, he makes you a literal war god on the battlefield. Khorne's empowerment is one of the most potent forms of warp enhancement in all of 40k. Warriors blessed by the blood god gain massively enhanced physical strength. We're talking punching through a tank level of power, unholy durability, pain is irrelevant, wounds are ignored, and blood just fuels more rage. Absurd speed and reflexes, Khârn is seen leaping dozens of feet in the air and closing gaps in seconds. There's also warp-fueled combat instinct, an almost supernatural ability to read and counter enemies' attacks, a psychic aura of terror and violence, meaning his presence alone breaks morale and disrupts cohesion, and finally, one of the most powerful passive abilities is their immunity to psychic attacks. Due to Khorne's hatred of sorcery, psychic abilities have little to no effect on those chosen by Khorne. And for Khârn, this turns him from an elite warrior into a one-man extinction event. After his transformation, Khârn has 3 major showings that prove his spot on this list. First is against Sigismund during the events of the First Wall. During the Siege of Terra at the Lionsgate spaceport, Khârn battles Sigismund in his base form before Siggy wields the Black Blade. While Sigismund is described as the more technically skilled fighter, he simply can't overcome the sheer power, speed, and unrelenting brutality Khârn brings to the fight. Khorne's blessings let Khârn overpower him blow for blow and force Sigismund on the defensive. It's one of the closest and most intense fights of the entire siege, until later. The second significant fight is against Janetta Kroll, the Lord Commander of the Sisters of Silence. That may not sound like much until you remember her null aura, suppressing the warp and weakening demonic and warp-enhanced beings just by existing. And the craziest thing about this is Khârn killed her without even noticing she was there. In one of the weirdest deaths in 40k, Janetta Kroll literally just gets hit by Khârn swinging his axe like a frickin' idiot. Like literally guys, Khârn is just running around like a madman swinging his axe and he somehow hits Janetta Kroll. I know that's not really much of a feat, but still being able to kill a Sister of Silence without even noticing them is pretty impressive. Finally, the third fight is Khârn and Sigismund's rematch in the book Warhawk. Sigismund returns, but this time he is wielding the Black Blade and faces Khârn once more, and Khârn goes the distance. He gives Black Knight Sigismund his hardest fight in the entire siege, lasting longer than any other traitor and pushing the Black Knight to his absolute limit. In the end, Khârn falls, but not before proving that he is one of the most terrifying combatants the traitors ever produced. Here it is guys, the final warrior in what I call the greater demon tier. These are the warriors whose speed, strength, and skill would let them go toe-to-toe with the worst monstrosities the warp could throw at you. But the next Marine, he doesn't fight like a demon, he fights like a goddamn storm. Coming in at number 6 is Targutai Usui, the Chief Stormseer of the White Scars Legion. Now we reach the final base form Space Marine on this list and the first Psyker to enter the rankings. Before diving into the legend that is Targutai Usui, we need to talk about Psykers in general. Psykers are one of the most broken archetypes in Warhammer 40k. In some books, they casually wipe out entire squads, crush tanks, or duel demons with their brains. In others, they drop dead the moment someone throws a pebble at them. Their power levels are widely inconsistent because different Black Library authors interpret and write them very differently. So for the sake of fairness and to avoid endless, well, if he theoretically did this, then he should be able to do this arguments, we're sticking to hard on-page feats only. We're not giving bonus points for potential, we're judging psychers based on what they actually did during the Horus Heresy. With that rule laid down, let's talk about the War Mage of the Steeps himself, the White Scar Stormborn Sorcerer, Targutai Usui. Targutai was only active during the early stages of the heresy, and unfortunately, he never made it to Terra. But despite his short-lived presence, he accomplished two extremely significant feats. First, when his ship was boarded by a strike force of Space Marines. Targutai effortlessly restrained and captured all 12 of them within mere seconds. He casually flicked Marines aside, destroyed incoming bolt rounds midair, and used Warp Lightning to disable them. An incredibly flashy and terrifying display of power. Later, Targutai would go on to perform one of the most consequential psychic feats in all of 30k. Using a prototype version of the Golden Throne, he successfully opened a webway portal, allowing the entire White Scar fleet to escape annihilation. While not a true combat feat, this demonstrates the sheer magnitude of the psychic energy he could wield. So why does he come in at number 6? Well, as always, grading psychers is tricky. Theoretically, if Targutai could casually disable a dozen Marines and power up ancient lost tech once intended for the Emperor himself, then yeah, he should be able to vaporize enemies with a thought. And maybe he can, but it's just not fair to play the theoretical game with psychers. Their power levels are widely inconsistent, and the narrative often treats them like plot devices more than just characters. That said, we do know this. Targutai is undeniably strong enough to take down a half-company Marine solo and wields enough warp energy to activate a prototype Golden Throne, albeit one likely far weaker than the real one on Terra. I would say he definitely scales above everyone we've listed so far. But the top 5, that's a different league. Too stacked, too dangerous, too proven in one-on-one combat. So while Targutai earns his place among the greatest psychers of the heresy, he falls just short of the top 5. Now, as I stated with Khârn, the last one ranked on our list, he was the last one in the greater demon tier, which means Targutai grabs the first spot in our low Primarch tier. Those in this new ranking can probably duel Primarch, if only for a brief time, overcome impossible odds, and are often the pinnacle of their legion's potential. But in regard to the ranking, Targutai is our number 6. I hope all of this makes sense, folks. I'm just trying to keep this list both entertaining and fair when comparing Marines to Psychers. Now it's time to introduce our final contenders. Those who stand atop the pyramid, the elite, the monsters, the low Primarch tier. Here are our final champions. First, we have Sigismund the Black Knight, wielding the infamous Black Blade, the arcane weapon personally forged by the Emperor himself. With it, Sigismund becomes a one-man reckoning, the sharpest edge of the Imperium's wrath. Second, we have Ahriman, Chief Librarian of the 1,000 Suns, the arcane genius of Prospero, empowered by Chaos Fateweaver and the insidious blessings of the Warp. This is Ahriman at his most dangerous, armed with prophecy, sorcery, and a will unbent by fate itself. Third, we have Jago Sevatar, the Prince of Crows, who has finally unleashed the full power of his psychic might, no longer suppressing the potent psychic talents that even his Primarch feared. With claw, blade, and sorcery, he has become the Night Haunter's true shadow. Fourth is Typhus the Traveler. Swollen with the Destroyer Plague and bloated with warp corruption, Typhus has become a literal plague himself, now fully utilizing his hidden psychic might. And last but not least, Ezekiel Abaddon, first captain of the Luna Wolves turned War Master in waiting. Fully and finally empowered by the Warp and all 4 Chaos Gods, this is the Proto-War Master at his most terrifying. Not yet the despoiler of M42, but the apocalyptic promise of what he would become. Now that all our contenders stand revealed in all their terrifying glory, it's time to decide once and for all who was the strongest Space Marine from the Horus Heresy. Who could take on gods, slay legends, and carve their name into the stars. We're going to debate each of their feats and then compare them against each other, starting with the Black Knight. Sigismund, the first captain of the Imperial Fists, the Eternal Crusader, and eventually the Emperor's champion. Let's start with his base form feats, which are already terrifying. This man defeated Jubal Khan, the White Scar's most gifted duelist, Horus Heresy, one of the Mournival, 199 straight Black Templars, and even a Contemptor Dreadnought. He fought Sevatar from dusk till dawn, and by every account was gaining the upper hand until Sevatar cheated. That alone should tell you how monstrous he was in single combat. Then we have one of the most insane moments in the Siege of Terra, Sigismund taking on Demon Primarch Fulgrim and not only surviving, but managing to wound the twisted demigod before Rogel Dorn stepped in to save him. He also defeated Eidolon, the Emperor's children noise freak himself, but eventually this insane run would end when Sigismund would lose to Khârn corrupted Khârn in one of the most brutal fights of the heresy. But this wasn't the end. After his defeat, Sigismund receives a new weapon in Warhawk, the Black Blade. Let's talk about that sword for a second. The Black Blade was forged by the Emperor himself, handed to Malgador the Sigillite, and given to Sigismund personally. This wasn't just a gift, it was destiny. When he touched it, Sigismund entered a trance-like state. He realized this was always meant to be his burden. The weapon itself was monstrous, a massive jet black sword etched with golden runes. It was impossibly heavy, radiating some kind of unnatural power. And even stranger, the sword seems to be whispering something at the edge of hearing, and the sword itself completely lacks reflection, like it's absorbing both light and hope. We don't get a detailed explanation of the sword's abilities, but its effect is clear. It changes him. From that moment on, Sigismund stops being just a captain, and he becomes something else. The Emperor's champion, the Black Knight. The sword seemed to amplify his raw power, and I'm theorizing even nullifying warp energies around him. In my opinion, this allowed Sigismund to cut through warp-infused champions of chaos by weakening their unnatural powers. With it, he tears through corrupted marines, psychers, plague marines, and much more during the siege. He even defeats Khârn, the same Khârn who previously beat him. This time, Sigismund walks away unscathed. The Black Knight form is Sigismund at his peak, focused, empowered, and absolutely terrifying. Let's move from the Emperor's Wrath to the Master of the Arcane. Ahriman, Chief Librarian of the 1,000 Suns and Sorcerer Supreme, empowered by Kairos Fateweaver himself and the twisting currents of the warp. Let's break down his feats. In his base form, Ahriman's feats already verge on the terrifying. He slays multiple Space Wolves during the Burning of Prospero, including Othir Weirdbank, a potent Ruin Priest whose soul he indirectly annihilates. Later on, during his quest to recover the Shards of Magnus, Ahriman begins to ascend to his next form, and the form will be scaling today, Chief Librarian Ascended. Upon discovering a shard on Nicaea, he realizes he lacks the raw power to overcome it alone. Forced to make a bargain with the insidious forces of the warp, he makes a pact with a mysterious demon, later revealed to be none other than Kairos Fateweaver. How many goddamn times is this guy gonna pop up throughout the heresy? First the Lion, now Ahriman. The guy's literally a Dave Filoni character. If you guys have not seen any of the Star Wars shows, he's literally Ahsoka. He just pops up everywhere. That was kind of a weird metaphor, but whatever. With this new power flowing through him, Ahriman begins to succeed where he once failed, ultimately defeating the Shard and continuing his quest. We next see this form of Ahriman during the Siege of Terra, where his power escalates even further. He subtly manipulates Perturabo's thoughts to serve the 1,000 Sun interests, a feat bordering on the impossible. He summons hordes of demons to assault loyalist lines and even infiltrates the Emperor's sanctum, which, as you all know, is defended by the Emperor's wards. And from one dark mind to another, let's move to a being who, for far too long, kept his true power caged. Sevatar, the Prince of Crows, is next, and this time, he's fully awakened. Let's talk about the feats from Sevatar, the first captain of the Night Lords, and arguably the edgiest duelist this side of Nostromo. In his base form, Sevatar is already a terror on the battlefield. He famously duels Sigismund from dusk till dawn, only beginning to lose as the sun rises. And even then, just barely. He defeats Alos not once, but twice, and let's not forget, Alos held his own against a Primarch for a full minute. Sevatar also humiliates Felzoras, the chief librarian of the Night Lords, though to be fair, he briefly uses his psychic powers to fling Felzoras around like a ragdoll. Still, it counts. Unfortunately, Sevatar's kill streak gets cut short when he's captured by the Dark Angels and imprisoned for the remainder of the heresy. But this isn't the end. Oh no. Towards the very end of the heresy, Sevatar finally stops repressing the psychic powers that have been eating him alive from the inside out. What he becomes is one of the rarest threats in 30k, a psychic powerhouse wrapped in the body of a dueling wonder. Sevatar's psychic abilities include minor foresight. Yes, he can literally see a few seconds into the future while fighting, just like Conrad Kurz. The ability to speak to the dead, mind infiltration, though he fails against Kurz himself, and classic telekinesis with enough force to ragdoll lesser Astartes. He likely used his foresight during the Thramas Crusade, meaning his base form already benefits from slight foresight, but he was holding back the full extent of his powers, suppressing them by the order of Conrad Kurz. So let's finally talk about Psychically Awakened Sevatar, a short-lived but terrifying form. In this state, Sevatar breaks out of his Dark Angel prison cell, sneaks undetected through the Invincible Reason, which is the Gloriana-class flagship of the Dark Angels, and assassinates a Master Astropath, a brutal bit of vengeance for a wrong done to a fellow Astropath who helped ease Sevatar's psychic pain. Yes, he gets recaptured, but that doesn't change the fact that he went full ninja wizard assassin inside a Dark Angels flagship. It's hard to scale this version of Sevatar, but try we must. Next up, Typhus the Traveler, the man who brought pestilence to the stars, the walking embodiment of rotten ruin. Let's dive into the Herald of Nurgle and talk about his feats. The version of Typhus the Traveler we're looking at happens during the later stages of the heresy, when Typhus is consumed and empowered by the Destroyer Plague during the events of Buried Dagger. He becomes one of the most horrifying creations in Nurgle's bloated arsenal. This isn't your average runny nose and stomach bug. The Destroyer Plague is a sentient, worm-borne disease made up of an endless swarm of demonic plague flies. These flies infest every orifice of the body, lay eggs inside victims, and bloat them until they literally burst like overripe fruit, releasing even more swarms of flies in a sickening cycle of death and rebirth. Oh my god, that's gross. But the plague does more than devastate enemies. It empowers Typhus. In this form, he's effectively unkillable through conventional means, displaying rapid regeneration and monstrous durability. His crowning moment comes when he goes toe-to-toe with Mortarion himself. In a staggering feat, Typhus manages to duel his Primarch for some time, using his psychic abilities to destabilize Mortarion and his plague-enhanced body to constantly heal and recover. Of course, Mortarion ultimately wins. He's still a damn Primarch, but the fact that Typhus could last more than a second is genuinely impressive. And even after Mortarion strikes him down, Typhus doesn't stay dead. The Destroyer Plague seems to allow him to regenerate from what should be mortal wounds, letting him return whole even after catastrophic defeats. Later during the Siege of Terra, he faces off against the Dark Angels during the assault on the Astronomicon and manages to psychically wound Cypher, one of the stronger Dark Angel psychers. Unfortunately, that's where things start to unravel. For all the build-up, Typhus never actually gets to fight any of the major duelists in 30k. No Sigismund, no Corswain, and no Abaddon. For all the foreshadowing and dark power, Dan Abnett sets him up like a goddamn end boss, but Typhus never truly gets his moment. He's presented as this unstoppable plague engine, and then just kinda stands in the background being gross.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
A depressing waste of potential in my mind. But if Typhus was the bloated nightmare of Nurgle's garden, our final contestant is the ascendant fist of chaos undivided itself, Ezekiel Abaddon. Abaddon is without a question one of the greatest duelists in Warhammer 40k. It's honestly kind of insane when you lay out the feats. In his base form alone, Abaddon defeats Garviel Loken of the Luna Wolves, Zardu Lyak, and his two Blade Slaves at the same time, Jubal Khan, and most impressively takes down Garro, Endred Har, and Bel Sepstis within moments of each other. That's 3 named Space Marine warriors gone in the blink of an eye. His only real blemish is his loss to Eco's Leomade in an honor duel, something that feels more like a narrative curveball than a reflection of his true power level. But that's just base Abaddon. During the End in the Death Part 3, Abaddon finally embraces chaos fully. As he prepares to confront Constantine Valdor himself, he is gifted the blessings of all 4 Chaos Gods. He takes a punch to the face from Constantine Valdor, catches the Regent's thrust mid-strike, and fights him blow for blow. Now it's debatable whether Abaddon definitely wins that duel. The fact remains that he can stand up to Valdor, who is definitely one of the most powerful beings in the 30k setting, which is a staggering leap in power. Remember folks, this form of Abaddon isn't his current 40k self, which would be completely unfair to everyone on this list. This is still Siege of Terra Abaddon, but he's still amped beyond belief by the Chaos Gods and the Warp. Every feat from his base form pretty much gets dialed up to 11. He's definitely above Custodes tier and potentially rivals Valdor himself. And with that, we come to our final act, ranking the top 5 Space Marines from the Horus Heresy. From the Blade Masters to the Demigod Psychers, let's count down who stood at the absolute peak when swords were drawn and bloods were spilled. So who is starting our ranking off at number 5? Well, after a long debate, it pains me to do this, but coming in at number 5 is Sevatar, the infamous first captain of the Night Lords. And before you flood the comments with, "What are you talking about, Cow? Sevatar solos," let's break it down. Yes, Sevatar ties with base Sigismund in their duel, but it's explicitly stated that Sigismund was slowly winning. Sevatar realized this and pulled a classic Night Lords move, headbutting him to end the fight before Siggy could claim the victory. Is that a dub? Kind of. Is it conclusive? Not really. He also takes down Alos and Felzoras, which are impressive, but both of them scale well below the heavy hitters that the top 4 have gone toe-to-toe with. Now, Sevatar is a psyker. He has foresight, limited telekinesis, and can infiltrate minds. But when he tries that trick on Conrad Kurz, he gets cast out like a bad dream. Compare that to Ahriman, who invades Perturabo's mental fortress like it's a warm-up round. The biggest what-if with Sevatar is that we never get to see him fully unleash his psychic powers in full glory. We only get a short glimpse of his true self in the final acts of the Thramas Crusade, and it's to sneak around and kill an Astropath Choir Master. We never see him clash with a Prime Loyalist or Traitor Champion at his peak form, and that's a goddamn shame. That said, Sevatar is still an absolute unit. He's brutal, clever, and one of those badass characters in 30k. But in terms of raw feats, he just doesn't stack up to the monsters above him. But he still ends up in low Primarch tier because Sevatar, with his combination of dueling wonder and psychic abilities, is an absolute monster and definitely could stand toe-to-toe against a Primarch at least for a short amount of time. But with all that said, that's why Sevatar, the Prince of Crows, lands at number 5 on our list. Our number 4 spot goes to the Lord of Farts, Typhus the Traveler. Now this one is definitely a controversial pick. I know, I hear a lot of people saying Typhus should be higher, but hear me out, fellas. The top 4 on this list, they all fought Primarchs at one point. Everyone, well, except Abaddon, but we'll get to him in a minute. Because he fought Constantine Valdor, who I personally believe is skimming just beneath the Primarch tier. We'll save how strong is Valdor for another time. So what about Typhus? He fights Mortarion, who is one of the weaker Primarchs, and while Typhus holds his own in the sense that he survives, he doesn't really land a single hit. And this is still base Mortarion before his full Warp Daddy ascension. Typhus has constant regeneration, has great durability, and has a Destroyer Plague living inside him, all of which makes him a nightmare to put down. He is pretty much a brick wall of rotting, unstoppable meat. But when it comes to offense, I think he's lacking compared to the other top dogs. He's just not throwing the kind of punches that would hurt a Primarch, let alone defeat one. Unlike the 3 ahead of him, who have either clashed with, bloodied, or outright beaten some of the nastiest legends of the era. To be fair though, he does get way stronger in 40k. We're talking full-blown Grey Knight squad deletions levels of power. But here in 30k, Typhus is fresh in the role as the new host of the Destroyer Plague, still mastering the whole "I'm basically a sentient piece of shit." Honestly, like Sevatar, I really wish we got to see him throw down with Corswain or Sigismund, especially since they were literally inches away from each other during the Battle of Hollow Mountain. The missed potential hurts my frickin' udders, but based on what we do get, number 4 is a worthy rank for the Lord of Farts. Our number 3 spot goes to the future despoiler, Mr. Ezekiel Abaddon. Abaddon is a tough one to place. Even in his base form during the Horus Heresy, he's an absolute monster, clearly outmatching every one of his opponents in raw power and skill, and he even goes toe-to-toe with Constantine Valdor, the Captain General of the Custodes. That feat alone speaks volumes. While it's hard to say definitely if he could have beaten Valdor in a straight fight, the fact that they traded blows at all and Abaddon wasn't instantly killed is a massive feat. Valdor, after all, is arguably on the lowest rung of the Primarch power scale, and that still puts him far above most Astartes. For including Abaddon's 40k form, blessed by all 4 Chaos Gods, wielding Draken, and leading Black Crusades, he'd easily take the number 1 spot. But this is 30k and that version of Abaddon hasn't fully arrived yet. Still, we can estimate his scale by looking ahead to one very important fight. Abaddon vs Sigismund at the dawn of the First Black Crusade. Even after being empowered by the gods and wielding Draken, Abaddon struggles to put down Sigismund, and that Sigismund, 1,000 years older, battle-hardened, and still wielding the Black Blade though. That tells us a lot. If the two fought during the heresy, before Abaddon's full ascension, I believe Sigismund would take the win, although it would be incredibly close. That being said, Abaddon still ranks well above Typhus and Sevatar, and the fact that he can engage Valdor and walk away is a tier of power few can claim. Which finally brings us to the top 2. Make your bets, people. Ahriman vs Sigismund, the Chief Librarian Ascendant versus the Black Knight. Ahriman, empowered by the warp and bolstered by the borrowed powers of Kairos Fateweaver himself, and Sigismund, the Emperor's champion, wielding the Black Blade, a mysterious paragon weapon that enhances his already lethal skills and potentially nullifies warp-based powers around him. So how are we going to decide this? We're looking at feats only, folks. Let's examine the best each had to offer. Let's look at Sigismund first. In his base form, Sigismund wounds Demon Primarch Fulgrim, a feat few mortals can even dream of. Once he wields the Black Blade, he slaughters an unnumbered amount of corrupted marines, including Plague Marines, Khârn Berserkers, and Slaaneshi warriors, all of whom are dripping with warp corruption. The Black Blade itself, it's heavy, it drinks in light, it whispers, and based on what we've seen, there's a strong reason to believe the Black Blade might actually be a no weapon, which would explain how Sigismund is able to cut through Chaos Champions like there's no tomorrow. Although I will admit, there is no specific evidence that this is true. I'm simply theorizing. And on the other hand, we have Ahriman. In his base form, Ahriman kills multiple Space Wolves, including the powerful Ulthir Weirdmake. After falling to Chaos, Ahriman is enhanced by the powers of the Warp and Kairos Fateweaver. With this empowerment, he defeats the Shard of Cadmus, a fragment of Magnus the Red Soul. But if we're directly comparing feats, and not to be that guy, but Sigismund wounds a full Demon Primarch in base form, while Ahriman needs warp buffs to defeat a Shard of one. So if we're power scaling like degenerates, we need to answer the question, how strong is a Shard of Magnus? Well, a Shard of Magnus is significantly weaker when compared to a full Demon Primarch. It's not nothing, but they're definitely not in the same league, which is important context. Ahriman didn't even manage to take on this fragment by himself. He needed the help of a demon to empower him. Okay, but feats aside, what if we match them against each other in a head-to-head fight? Ahriman's powers in this form include telekinesis, time manipulation, telepathy, pyromancy, biomancy, shadowcraft, reflexes enhanced by the warp, and shielding and weapon redirection. Sigismund, in his Black Knight form, is probably the best duelist in 30k, and the Black Blade itself massively enhances his combat capabilities. And once again, I'm theorizing here, the Black Blade might be potentially a no weapon, which would greatly aid him in this fight. So who would win? If Ahriman keeps his distance and unleashes the full array of his psychic arsenal, he has a serious shot at taking down Sigismund. His warp enhanced abilities give him a superior versatility. But, and it's a big but, if Sigismund closes the distance, it's probably over for the sorcerer. He's faster than he has any right to be with such a heavy weapon, and if the Black Blade does indeed nullify warp energies, that puts Ahriman in serious danger. Plus, Ahriman's durability and melee prowess are nowhere near Sigismund's level. If this actually happened in the lore, the winner would be decided by the author writing the book. but we're trying to be objective here, guys. After everything we've looked at, the feats, the lore, the powers, and the weapons, it's really close. Really close. Ahriman is terrifying, but Sigismund has the track record, the tools, and the discipline to beat a foe like Ahriman. So in my humble, slightly warped-touched cow opinion, I'm calling it. The number 2 spot goes to Ahriman, the Ascended Librarian, and number 1 goes to Sigismund the Black Knight, making Sigismund the strongest Space Marine from the Horus Heresy. I know picking Sigismund over Ahriman is gonna raise a lot of eyebrows, but once again, let me explain. Ahriman is an absolute monster with his psychic powers, and taking out a shard of Magnus is no joke. Although there's no official confirmation that the Black Blade is a null weapon, there's a mountain of evidence that points in that direction. The thing drinks in light, just like many null weapons. It murmurs like a psychically active piece of gear, and most importantly, Sigismund used it to absolutely wreck warp-infused enemies. Even without it, Sigismund's martial skill, insane willpower, and feats in the heresy put him right at the very top. I mean, come on guys, in his base form, he fought and wounded a demon Primarch. That demon Primarch being Fulgrim, one of the best duelists in 30k. I betrayed my own favorite legion, the 1,000 Suns, but I feel the facts are simply in Sigismund's favor. Before concluding this video, let's do a quick recap of all the Marines we ranked today. Coming in at number 24 was Artillus Numan. Following him, at number 23 was Armillus Dynat. After him, coming in at number 22, was Forex from the Iron Warriors. At 21, we have Thos of the Failed Clan from the Iron Hands. At 20, we have Endred Har of the Black Shields. Moving up into Demon tier, we have at 19 Jubal Khan of the White Scars. At 18, we have Bjorn of the Space Wolves. At 17, we have Ecos Lameda of the Ultramarines. At 16, we have Lucius the Eternal of the Emperor's Children, the fucking biggest cunt in the galaxy. At 15, we have Garvio Loken, the frickin' goat. At 14, we have Nikona Sherokin, the absolute Shadow Sword, and the father of Lucius the Eternal. Moving into Custodes tier, we have number 13 with Raldron, who's consumed by the Black Rage. Number 12, Argol Tau, the best Pookie in the galaxy. At number 11, we have Nasir Ahmet, also consumed by the Black Rage. And following them, and concluding the Custodes tier, we have Corswain, the Hound of Calaman, literally a guy with a sword who was able to kill hundreds of corrupted Marines. After the Custodes tier, we enter the Greater Demon tier, where starting off at number 9, we have Nathaniel Garro, empowered by the Emperor's Light. And then at 8, we have the bald cunt Erebus using a Nunzia. And at 7, we have Khârn, fully embracing his Khârn gifts. And the final 6 we have ranked, in low Primarch tier, we have Targutai Usui, the Chief Stormseer of the 5th Legion. Following him, we have Sevatar, the Prince of Crows, who has finally awakened his psychic might. Coming in at 4, we have Typhus the Traveler, the biggest shit stain in the galaxy. At number 3, we have Ezekiel Abaddon, the future War Master and one of the biggest pricks in the galaxy. And then at number 2, we have one of the biggest controversial takes on this channel, Azek Ahriman, the Ascended Chief Librarian. And then rounding out the whole ranking, we have Sigismund, the Black Knight, the Big Papi, the Big Daddy, the Chaos Father. And finally, it's all over. We've ranked every champion from the Horus Heresy, from the duelist dripping in plot armor, to the powerful psychers from the 1,000 Suns. We pitted them head to head, tore apart their feats, and crowned the single strongest Space Marine from this era. Until Black Library wakes up one day and decides to retcon everything because they thought it'd be funny. And trust me, I can't wait for the Scouring series to drop and completely ruin this entire ranking. I can already hear the Chaos apologists foaming at the mouth. But hey, until then, this is the definitive list. Probably. Maybe? I have no fucking idea. I just want to say thank you, seriously, to everyone who supported the channel so far. You've watched the videos, commented, argued about power levels, and helped me grow a ridiculous amount. You make this worth doing every single time, and I love you all more than Sigismund loves cutting heretics in half. If you like this video, hit that like button like it's Argol Tau punching Erebus in the face. Subscribe for more lore, chaos, memes, and utter meltdowns. Stay milked, guys, stay blessed, and I'll see ya in the next video.